2025 has been a really solid year for racing games so far. We're only 5 months in and we've seen both Tokyo Extreme Racer and Assetto Corsa Evo release into early access, with full releases coming later this year. But today I'm taking a look at a brand new game, JDM Japanese Drift Master. I just finished the game, so most of my thoughts here are pretty fresh, but I wanted to give my input on what I like, what I don't like, what I'd like to see added, and most importantly, if it's worth buying today. But before I dive into the game, I just want to quickly thank the developer and publisher Gaming Factory for providing me with a key for a review. I wasn't paid and all opinions shared in this video are my own, so thank you again to Gaming Factory for providing the channel with a key for review. I also want to quickly mention that I have a Patreon if you'd like to support me on there, where I post exclusive behind the scenes content and more. And if you enjoy this video, please like it and consider subscribing for more racing game content. It helps the channel out a lot. With all of that out of the way, let's dive into JDM Japanese Drift Master. Let's start with the things that I like. The cars, I'd argue, are the most important part of any racing game, and they've done a great job of including different cars from different brands like Nissan, Honda, Subaru, and Mazda all being represented, with Nissan having the most cars at 10. There are a few GTRs, a few Silvias, and a few Zs, and even a car I've never heard of, the Nissan Laurel. They even have the new Z, which is sick. I've only seen this car once in person, so I'm stoked to keep playing and be able to buy it. I will say though, Nissan's cars seem to span more generations than the other brands, like Subaru for example. They have a few WRXs, but are notably missing the newest one. Whereas with Nissan, they have Zs spanning all the way back to the 70s, and of course the newest one I mentioned before, and a few in between. In addition, they're missing some pretty big notable cars and brands. No Toyota, Mitsubishi, or Suzuki, though they do have badgeless cars like the AE86, a 3000 GT, and an 8th gen Lancer Evo, so it's not all bad. The developers have said that they're just waiting on the licenses and these cars will be badged in time. No idea when that'll be, but I think it'll be soon. The cars are all modeled beautifully too. They've laser scanned every car in the game and it shows. They have dev diaries on their YouTube channel detailing this process, as well as other behind the scenes development footage, so I'll link that down in the description below if you'd like to check it out. I found the customization to go beyond what I expected as well. There are the usual suspects like wheels and spoilers, bumpers, body kits, that sort of thing. I'm not trying to downplay this. They're beautifully modeled and there's some really cool options here depending on which car you pick. But what really blew me away was the interior customization. There's customizable steering wheels, shift knobs, seats. It's super cool stuff. I don't really ever play in first person, so I didn't fool around with this too much, but it's a sick addition either way. What you're seeing on screen is footage of my modded RX-7 with different customization parts on it, including the interior where I've swapped out the shift knob and seats. This is something I don't really see even in mainstream racers, so it was a nice surprise to see it in an indie game like this. Truthfully, I'd never know that this is an indie game based off of the footage alone. They've done an incredible job of not only creating these cars, but also the world to drive them in. The roads are so tight and narrow sometimes, I felt like I could actually see this place existing. There's windy, twisting roads through the countryside, as well as little towns to cruise through, with different little buildings to see. Granted, you can't interact with the vast majority of them, but I still liked driving past them and seeing their lights on at night. Typically, I'm not really a fan of open world racing games. It's something I'm definitely warming up to more as I've gotten older, but I've always gravitated towards just kind of picking tracks and cars from a menu and going on. I only say this because I usually don't cruise around in open world games. I tend to just kind of beeline it from one event to the next, and if something happens along the way, that's cool. If not, also cool, right? But in this game, I found myself doing it quite a bit, especially at night. The game actually gets dark at night, which has been a pet peeve of mine for a long time now in games, so good on you, JDM. It allowed me to really get immersed, at least at first. I'll explain more about that later. I liked how the more I drove a car too, the more I'd level it up and my driver up, which allows you to unlock more performance and customization parts. This game doesn't just throw money and parts at you, at least not at first, so you really need to be calculated with your next move. Do I buy that shiny new car that I really want and run it bone stock for a bit, or do I just save my money and put a fraction of that cost into my current build? It incentivized me to really learn the ins and outs of my car and in turn get better with it. The game starts you out with a rusty old AE86, and I ended up using it for all of Chapter 1 and the majority of Chapter 2. At that point, I bought the RX-7 and just kind of upgraded it as I went, buying the newest parts I had available to me. After using the RX-7 for some of Chapter 2, all of Chapter 3, and most of Chapter 4, I finished Chapter 4 and Chapter 5 with the R34. It was really fun trying to tweak and modify cars to do what you needed them to do. I'm truthfully pretty terrible at drifting, and so I had to look up what kind of things people do to their cars IRL to drift. Those things being brake balance and toe out on the front wheels, toe in on the back, that sort of thing. I really appreciate when games include these sort of setup screens, and in this game it's very straightforward and easy to read and understand. To help you further, JDM has two handling modes to choose from, one called Simcade and the other called Arcade. As far as I understand it, these are just presets for your assist. Arcade has ABS, ESP, Drift Assist, and Brake Assist enabled, whereas Simcade has all but ABS disabled. I found that the arcade setting felt right to me. I'm not really looking for a realistic drifting game, so I'm sorry I can't provide more insight there, but using my Xbox controller, I found that the arcade setting helped me out a lot. It requires less precise input and is more forgiving overall. I found it easier to kick the car's back end out and maintain a drift, whereas with the Simcade setting, I had to be a bit more deliberate with my inputs. I am by no means a drift fan. I think it's cool, it definitely has its place, but I'll be the first one to admit that I just flat out suck at it in video games. It's something where if I have the ability to procrastinate and do it later, I will. So I just found the arcade setting to be easier for me, but your mileage there may vary. It's 100% a skill issue on my part, and I'm trying to get better, I'm not denying this, but it takes time, and the arcade setting just seemed to be more my speed right now, but I may try out Simcade again in the future. I'd say the drifting in this game is pretty comparable to the drifting in other arcade racing games I've played. The cars that were set up to slide would slide, and I didn't have too much issue chaining my drifts together, depending on the course. On the courses where the track went back and forth, left to right constantly, I had no issue chaining my drifts together and maintaining my combo, and it looked sick to boot. But tracks with long straightaways, I struggled a bit. It took me a while to really understand how to chain my drifts together, and I still feel like I have a lot to learn. Either way, I could probably tweak the setup of my car to help with that, but I honestly had no idea what I was doing. I ended up just looking up what people do IRL, but I'd love to see some preset settings added in the future. It is in their content roadmap, which we'll get into a little bit later, but I figured I'd mention it anyway. Ideally, I'd like to see a baseline preset for each type of mode in the game. So one for drifting, one for drag racing, and one for grip racing. Drag and grip are much more my speed, and I was pretty stoked to get into these. If the game was just drifting, I probably wouldn't have given it the time of day, but having these other two modes in here at least got my foot in the door. But to my surprise, there really weren't many of either of these. If I had to guess, ballpark answer, I'd say I've done maybe 4 or 5 drag races and probably 4 or 5 grip races. The drag races were fine, I guess. You have to warm up your tires and then time your launch and your upshifts. It reminds me a lot of the drag racing I've seen in like a Need for Speed Underground or something like that. Hard to judge based on the races that I did, but I will say that I find it odd that I have to drive back to the starting line after winning a race. Why not just reset me? Hell, I mean, just in one of my races, I didn't even have an opponent. I just blasted down the drag strip solo. I thought this was maybe a one-off occurrence, but in Chapter 4 it happened to me again. The game said I barely beat my opponent, but he was still at the start line when I looked in my rear view. Just very odd. But the mode seems fine outside of this. I think it just needs a little bit of tweak, some bug squashing, and it'll be fine. Grip racing, on the other hand, I gotta say, it needs a lot of work. And it's not really the handling or anything. That's mostly okay in my book. Cars tend to understeer and feel a bit clunky at times, but that may just be down to my setup. I can work around that either way. Most of my complaints are admittedly pretty nitpicky, but my biggest issue with grip racing comes down to that opponent AI. They just take such odd lines through the corners. They wreck each other. They just seem kinda lost at times. They don't seem to fight back or run you hard in the corners. They just kind of exist on the track with you. After a few corners, it kind of just turns into a time trial where I'm hot lapping. The racetracks in this game are modeled after real circuits. Like Segoya Racetrack is clearly Tsukuba, which is cool and it's nice to see, but I do have a complaint. I wish that these circuits were more integrated into the open world map. If you look at the map, they're all kind of tucked away on the far northwest part of the map. Let me drive around them. Let me drive in the pits and see the grandstands or something. These tracks feel so disconnected and distant from the rest of the game. It makes me feel like I'm playing a totally different game, and I hate that. It just breaks my immersion. And that sort of leads me into my next point that I briefly brought up earlier regarding immersion. I felt very alone while playing JDM. In the world while I was driving around, I didn't notice any other tuners on the road. They were mostly all commuter cars and vans and such. And so there was no one else to race in the world and really not much to do in that open world. There are sushi delivery missions, which I'll get to in a bit, as well as underground drifts and underground races. These are kind of interesting. You bet a certain amount of money, and as the bet goes up, so does the requirement needed to succeed. If you win, you double your money, but if you lose it all. It's fun for a bit, but I think being able to do this in the open world would elevate it. I like cruising around and speeding like a psycho, but I don't want to be the only one in the world doing it. I want to see other race cars on the road to challenge to an impromptu race, or like a drift challenge, or I want to see specific locations on the map to drift so I can compete against my friends on a leaderboard. And finally, I want to see other cars competing against each other with nothing to do with me. I don't want them to ghost through me or whatever. I want them to try to get around me. I want to see some absolute maniacs flying around these roads. And I want that because I want this world to feel more alive. And in its current state, I'm pretty disappointed in this aspect of the game. If you're the kind of player that loves to just cruise around and customize cars, maybe this won't be a deal breaker for you. Maybe this game is exactly what you're looking for, because it is fun in that regard. There's lots of options for customization and lots of roads for you to slide around on. But for me, I want a bit more. Immersion is huge for me, not just in racing games, but in general, and I just don't feel immersed driving around in this world after a few hours. Playing Tokyo Extreme Racer earlier this year, I loved the fact that you could challenge drivers on the highway, as well as racers at the different parking garages and stationary locations around the map. I felt truly immersed in that game, even if the world wasn't as detailed as JDM's. There were so many other racers on the map, and you could challenge anyone, and I mean anyone on the map, to a race, even commuter cars and big box trucks. It's great. And the AI in that game, while not perfect, really ran you hard at times. I had more than a few races where I would lead a little, then my opponent would come back and we'd be bobbing and weaving through traffic, racing our asses off. Maybe my opinion will change, but I haven't had this experience yet in JDM, and I hope that changes over time. Even if we can't challenge the other drivers, I would love to be able to just see them in the world in JDM. Maybe it'd inspire me to buy a car I wouldn't have otherwise, or maybe I'd experience a big wreck that I wouldn't see otherwise. I know I sound really negative and down on JDM, and I hate to do it, I really do, but I just want the game to be the best game possible. And they've nailed just about every other aspect of this game, but I can't overlook this one. It's just too important to me. There just isn't much to do outside of that main story, and I know I haven't really talked about it yet, but there really isn't much to talk about. It's told completely through a manga, which is pretty cool, and I think that might be a first for me. The gist is that you're a Polish man named Tomas, or Toma, like the characters call him, I hope I pronounced that right, who decided to leave his native Poland after his father passed so he can chase his dream in Japan of becoming a drifter. It sounds a little half serious at first, but it very quickly devolves into just total ridiculousness. There's one mission in particular where you're trying to impress this guy's girlfriend, and then when he finds out, you have to beat him in a race. There's one mission where you're trying to beat a female competitor to get her to give up another woman's number. Your sponsor is a sushi restaurant, so there's one mission where you're delivering sushi, and all you're told is that this is a very important customer, quote unquote. When you get there, the woman wants to give you a very generous tip for your services. Can't say this on YouTube, you can use your imagination to fill in the gaps. But what I like about the sushi missions, outside of the obvious, is that the higher your drift score, the bigger your tip is from that customer. There's a guy who works at my local Domino's who drives a Scion FRS. I don't know about you guys, but I'd tip him more if he slid into my neighborhood with it. Though if I had to change anything about these missions, it's that I wish they allowed you to use your own car to deliver sushi in, and not the restaurant's delivery car. Minor gripe, but yeah. The story is fine too, I guess. The manga is a neat novelty, but it never really grabbed me in any meaningful way. Before I wrap this video up, I want to quickly mention the radio stations. There's a bunch of different music in this game, like hip-hop, EDM, synthwave, and more. Usually I would lean towards the rock and metal stations, and the rock station in this game is pretty good, but this game has dedicated stations to Eurobeat, city pop, and funk. I cannot fathom avoiding any of these in a drift game. These fit that vibe perfectly, and they're really high quality too. This isn't some cheap royalty-free soundtrack. I admit I haven't heard of any of these artists. I did some digging and one of them had as few as 600 monthly listeners on Spotify, so these guys are real underground, but don't let that fool you, there are some real bangers here. Unfortunately, I can't play any of them here on YouTube, but I've linked the soundtrack down below in the description of this video if you'd like to hear it for yourself. I highly recommend it. All in all, JDM Driftmaster is not a perfect game. It has some issues I've outlined in this video, and some other issues I haven't mentioned because I expect them to be fixed soon. But for every problem I found in this game, I found 3 or 4 things that I really liked. The cars handle well, there's a very refined selection of cool cars with a story that doesn't take itself too seriously. When things are clicking in this game, it's a great time. But when you kind of take a step back and ask for more outside of that main quest line, there just isn't much there. That being said, the developers have released a roadmap detailing what they plan to add to the game over the next 3 to 9 months, and some of these seem pretty significant. Things like new manga chapters, new side missions, new customization options like vinyl wraps, etc. That does make me question why this game is being sold as a full release and not as early access. Some of these things sound like DLC like the manga chapters, while others sound like features that should be in the game at launch, like vinyl wraps. Your opponents have vinyls. I'm not sure why you can't put vinyls on your car. It's a little weird. I think it'd be a much easier pill for me to swallow if this game was classified as quote-unquote unfinished or early access. I believe I'd be more willing to give it a pass on its current issues if that was the case. Regardless of this confusion, I think I have to make a judgment call. Is the game worth its $35 asking price today? I think that really depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking for a new drifting game and don't mind driving around by yourself, I say go for it. But if you're looking for a more well-rounded game with additional side content, I say you might want to wait for a few patches. For what it's worth, in its current state, I enjoyed my time with the game and I had the most fun time drifting out of all of the different modes. I came for the grip racing, but stayed for the drifting. I'm absolutely confident the developers can alleviate some of the issues I have with the game at this point in time, but these sorts of changes don't happen overnight. In a few months, not sure exactly when, but I want to take another look at the game and give you my thoughts on it, so get subscribed so you don't miss that. Enough about me though, it's time to turn it over to you guys. Will you be buying JDM? If not, why? And if you are, what are you most excited to do? Drag race? Grip race? Drift? I'm excited to read your responses. I try to read every comment posted. Thank you all so much for watching. Big thanks to my highest tier patrons CD-ROM Fossil and Arcade Racing Central, and all of my supporters over on Patreon. My name is Mercy, and as always, have a good one.